Hello, everyone. We all know that this conference is about the future of enterprise architects and enterprise architecture. And AI is the future. So here to tell us how you can stay ahead of AI, a practical guide for enterprise architects, we please welcome Andreas Welsh of Intelligence Briefing.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be back in Newtown Square. Like Timo said, we'll talk about how you can stay ahead of AI in times of so much information, news, and even disruption. One thing that I think is super critical is this one, right? In AI and game shows, timing is critical. Because if you buzz in and you want to be the first, you usually don't have a good answer. But if you wait too long, your competitors have given theirs already, and you're too late. So, timing is critical. So my name is Andreas Welsh. I am an independent AI strategy advisor. I've previously spent 23 years at SAP in various different leadership roles in and around the topic of AI, machine learning, generative AI. Most recently built the marketing organization for business AI in consistent messaging that you're seeing from SAP today. It's pretty exciting seeing where SAP is taking that now. I'm also an adjunct professor at Westchester University, just down the road from here. A top voice on LinkedIn, so I would encourage you to follow me there. I post every day about how you can implement AI in your business with success. And so you can learn about that there too. So I'll leave that up here for a second in case you already want to connect. Now, look, if we look at the headlines, right, just this year alone, just the last 2 months, it's pretty crazy, right? Every week, almost every day, there's a new headline that goes through the media. Right? At the beginning of the year, January 6th, Sam Altman says, "We're now confident we know how to build artificial general intelligence." The next week, it was Elon Musk saying, "By the way, we've exhausted all human-created data." The week after, we had DeepSeek, for those of you that follow the AI news, right, the Chinese model and assistant that has thrown the market in a little bit of a turmoil, at least for a couple of days there. And so you see one news piece after the other follows. And it gets really dizzying. What is it that I really need to know about? What really matters? And I'm curious, what do you think? Does any of this matter to the work that you do? Who's coming out with the latest foundation model? Who's chasing whom, right? Probably not. But we're inundated with so much news because all of these companies need to show that they're actually doing something, right? That they're innovating, that they're using the money, that they're using the funds that they're receiving to come out with something that maybe outpaces the next. But it's not necessarily helpful for us if we're an enterprise architect or IT roles, because there's so much noise, right? What really matters? I think today I saw something in the Wall Street Journal that there's a bit of a realization that these large data centers that are now being built, they're not job magnets in the long run, just to build them, but then to operate them, you actually need fewer people, right? Good and helpful information, but how can you actually make all of that relevant? A couple of weeks ago, early January, like you saw, artificial general intelligence was in the news again. It's not the first time, right? So I could see myself 30 years from now telling my kids how we said time and again that artificial general intelligence is near. But we said this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, since the history of AI started 1955, 1956. So there's always been this drive of what is new, what is coming. But things like that, right, they've always been a promise so far. But to make it more practical, right, and put all of these announcements in context, you can look at something like this here, right? AI labs, software vendors, they're coming out with new innovations, new features on a regular basis. Right? Some quarterly, some monthly, some you have the feeling they're doing this weekly or maybe even daily. But then when you look at your own company, in your own landscapes, how often are you updating things? How quickly are you able to adopt all this new innovation, be it from SAP or from any other vendor that you have in your stack. It's not at the same pace. So what's happening is that this gap is actually widening between what is possible and what the technology can do and what we're able to adopt in our businesses. I think that's a critical part to keep in mind and to keep front and center as enterprise architects. And as we're learning about what are the new things that are coming out, how can I help my organization future-proof? In the fall, Gartner ran a survey among CEOs and senior IT leaders, and they found that actually 74% of CEOs recognize that AI will transform the industry. Right? It's great. Compared to a couple of years ago, there's this realization that hey, here's a pivotal moment. We need to do something. We can do something. We can do things we haven't been able to do before. And if we can do it, probably everybody else of our peers and competitors is thinking the same thing. But then the other stat that you frequently see, right, be it 70%, 80, or 85, in this case from Gartner, 85, 85% of AI projects do not deliver value or the same value that the project sponsors had intended when they started the project. Right, so AI is super important. We need to do something. It'll change our industry. But then when you look at what comes out at the end, only 15% of projects deliver the value. So big gap. It has been there with machine learning, has been there with generative AI. I'm sure it'll be there now with the next thing, agentic AI. So as much as your vendors want to tell you, I would tell you you don't need more AI. No business needs more AI. It's kind of counterintuitive to what you maybe have heard today as well and yesterday. But I firmly believe no business needs more AI. Instead, what we need is actually better prepared AI leadership. We need to better understand what are the foundations of our leadership, how we bring AI into our organization, how do we operate it, not just in pilot projects, but how do we actually scale this to our entire organization, globally, many different markets, and how do we do that in a way that it's responsible, right? My favorite Spider-Man quote, that probably many of you know as well, with great power comes great responsibility. If now we have algorithms that can analyze data, that can make predictions, that can also make predictions and decisions that affect us as people, whether it's employees or our customers, we need to use that technology in a way that is responsible. So in my AI leadership handbook, I lay out the 9 dimensions of successful AI leadership in business. How can you turn technology hype into business outcomes? It starts with understanding what are the market dynamics, what is happening. Yes, the headlines are important, but not on a daily or on a weekly basis. It's a lot more important to understand what is happening in the grand scheme of things, and how is that relevant in my business. Strategy. I talked to some of the attendees yesterday and said, well, we need to figure out our AI strategy. Yes, you probably do, but starting with AI is usually not the best place to start. Right? Start with the business strategy. What are the big objectives that we're trying to achieve? How are we going to get more revenue? How are we opening new markets? How are we going to invest in new product lines? And how can technology like AI help us get there? Leadership certainly has a big role, right? In large organizations, you see chief transformation officers, chief digital officers, chief data officers. Maybe in your company, you might even have a chief AI officer. So a central role looking at this topic, not just from a technology point of view, but basically keeping all of these 9 aspects in balance. Product mindset, right? We talk a lot about AI projects. Maybe you've been there too, but we need to change that mindset. We need to adopt the product mindset that puts the user in the center, not your project plan, and not the end date, but the end user. Culture and collaboration. If you're in IT roles, and I have been there myself, when I was in IT, the business was far, far away. Sure, I had an idea of what SAP does, what the different business functions do, but there was a lot of close collaboration. For AI to be successful and to deliver meaningful business outcomes and impact, you need to work very, very closely with your business. You need to work on eye level with your peers to understand what are the targets that they have, what motivates them, how can you help them achieve their goals better, faster, with the help of technology. Ethics, privacy, we already talked about that. Then obviously technology and security. Yes, it's still a technology topic, but it's actually more of a people topic as well, right? How do you bring your people along? But you need to understand what are the technologies that are available and how can I use them. So you don't need more AI. No business needs more AI. I'm of the opinion we need better prepared leadership that takes all of these things into account. Right? Because if you come from a technology background, you're probably super excited by all these opportunities that we can now do, all the things that we have at our fingertips, right? ChatGPT and many other apps that are on our phones. And look at what we can do with this technology. And it's true and it's great, but technology doesn't solve a business problem, not by itself, right? Not in a vacuum. So that's why we need to keep all of these 9 dimensions in balance. Now, if you're in an AI leadership role or aspiring to be one, probably feel something like this. Again, coming back to the headlines. It's very dynamic, it's very bumpy, and you have a really hard time hanging on. We've seen this with machine learning, we've seen this with generative AI, usually the same pattern, right? Lots of noise, lots of talk in the market about we need to do this, you should do this. There are all these new opportunities to do things better and faster and cheaper than ever before, but nobody really knows what that means and what it looks like because nobody's done it before in that same sense. So we need to hold on. But why is that even so bumpy and so dynamic? If you look at your business, whatever industry you're in, there are a number of external factors that influence your business and your business strategy. You have new competitors, for example, because technologies like AI are now more becoming commoditized and anybody in the industry can access them. Even companies that don't exist yet will be able to use this as soon as they're formed, right? And they can out-innovate and out-compete you. New technologies, like we said, generative AI, agentic AI, all the buzzwords that you have probably heard about already the last couple of days and even before that. And new products, right? You have new entrants using new technologies to create new products that all of a sudden you need to compete with. Maybe there are data-driven products. Maybe there are also cloud-native vendors, technology vendors, software vendors that play on your turf now. Everybody or every company is becoming a software company, comes to mind there. So all of those factors influence your business strategy, which means whatever you set out as your business strategy 12 months ago now needs to adapt. And that's why you see a lot of this pressure top-down also. We need to figure out AI. We need to know and find a way how to use this technology in a way that it helps us move our business forward. That's where a lot of the pressure comes from, because the market doesn't stand still. But I would also caution you that not every business problem is an AI problem. So I'll let that sit for a second. Not every business problem is an AI problem. And in all of this excitement and maybe haste to do something with AI, we need to figure this out. We need to see where and how we can use AI, and let's give everybody Copilot and they will be more productive in a couple of days. It doesn't quite happen that way, right? So we need to think about the problem last and the solution first, instead of the technology. Many great technologies that we can use to solve individual problems. Maybe AI is the answer, maybe rules, maybe traditional programming is the answer. But just because AI is available, we shouldn't jump immediately at that opportunity and say, well, let's figure out how we can use AI. That's skinning the cat the wrong way. But we've seen this progression from machine learning, where we were able to classify and predict data and information. Is this a cat, a dog? Is this a drill? Is this a hammer? Type things, to identification, generation, right? Early image generation with deep learning, processing things at a massive parallel pace and scale, to generative AI. We're able to create, we're able to interpret. What do you see in this image? Can you analyze the tone of this text? Can you write it in a similar style? to now where we see the white circle agentic AI, where we are delegating more of our own agency to these AI systems. And they can reason and they can even execute tasks on our behalf. We're seeing not only the first glimpses, but even the first examples in industry where companies are looking at this. So you need to think about the solution first, and then about the technology. Sounds very basic and very fundamental. But again, in this excitement about AI, something we need to keep in mind. But we're moving towards more and more automation and more autonomous automation. And if you think about the bottom left here, we started with roles, right? In your ERP system, whether you use S/4HANA or ECC, there are many, many roles. I remember working on finance projects many years ago to match incoming payments to open invoices. Guess what? That was based on roles that maybe you and your business have defined. Then it was all about RPA, robotic process automation. Hey, we can automate the integration between two disparate systems, go log in here, download an invoice, extract the information, upload it in ERP, boom, off we go. Talked about machine learning. We look at data, we look at patterns in data to make decisions and to give recommendations. And now all of a sudden we're actually moving to the part where we are able to implement these recommendations, where agents will be able to implement these recommendations. And thinking about how this changed the paradigm, how this changes the paradigm of how we work and how our users work, I think that's pretty significant. Right? I've always done this in a certain way for the last 10 or 12 years. I know how to run this process. Now, not only do I have an AI that tells me how to do it better, it does it faster, and I have not even an idea of how it comes up with that suggestion. So what you likely face is a lot of resistance as well in the workforce when you engage in AI projects. I've been doing this myself. I don't need an AI to tell me how to do this. I know it better. And it gets really difficult, right? Because if you have people who are so skeptical that they are not going to adopt it, or maybe they even override what the system proposes, then it doesn't deliver the value that you intend. And we're back to the 85% of AI projects that do not deliver the value as intended. So, like I said earlier, right? About a month ago, the Chinese company DeepSeek put a new AI assistant on the market. The market went crazy. Financial market went crazy. So, well, what about all these data centers? What about all these chips? What about all the hardware? NVIDIA's stock tanked by, I think, 17% in a single trading session. The highest loss in market cap in the history. But what does that actually mean? If you think about it, something that you see here to your left was also coming up. This economic principle that's called Jevons paradox goes back to the 18th century by British economist Jevons, who found that as the cost of a good drops, the demand actually increases. It was observed in energy, with coal, with fuel. And the anticipation is that we'll see the same thing happen with AI as well. If AI gets cheaper and cheaper, that was the big thing for DeepSeek, we don't need as many high-performance compute appliances, we don't need the latest chips, but we can get very good results, and we can even match or outpace and outperform what OpenAI and others are putting out there. But if the cost drops, the demand surges. Now, put that in context. BCG, at the end of last year, found that companies who are leaders in AI follow this 10-20-70 rule. They invest about 10% in algorithms, 20 in basic technology, and 70 in what you see below the surface here, below the waterline of the iceberg, people and processes. Right? Yes, we talk about technology, but if you talk about, to your peers here, where are the challenges in your organization? Why are things not working as fast as they should? Why are we not seeing the adoption? Why don't we even know where to start? Very few times it's technology. Very few times it's algorithms. Right? It's because we have been used to working in a certain way. Our peers have been used to working in a certain way. So even though companies follow this 10-20-70 rule, still 2 out of 3 companies fail making their AI strategy successful because they are just struggling to reimagine how can we create these new workflows with AI, how does it change our work, and how do we bring our people along on this journey? And how do we upskill them? How do we give them not only the tools, but also the training to use these tools properly? So take that in context again with Jevons paradox. The cost for AI is going to drop. It's going to be commoditized even more. There's going to be more demand, which means that the pressure is going to rise as well. If it's cheaper for you, and for you, and for you, and for you, and you're in competition with each other, oh boy. Your CEO is probably going to put even more pressure on the AI team or on the enterprise architecture team to say, we need to figure this out. We need to do more AI and bring in more AI to our company. But if already 2 out of 3 are struggling with this, right, you're at the risk of just creating more sunk cost if you don't do it right. It's just faster. Right? We can use more AI in ways that are less expensive, so let's try out even more. We need to find ways to use AI. And again, that's usually the starting point on a road to failure. So, why do projects fail? From my experience, having worked with many Fortune 500s while I was working for SAP and now outside as well, there's one common theme. For example, AI projects are unlike any other IT projects that any of us have been engaged in. Right? Usually a project has a start and an end date. It's pretty linear. You look at your project plan, you take the different work packages, you assign work package owners, you have resources, you have deadlines. AI projects, they're usually different, right? Especially if you build AI models from scratch. If you don't use anything that you can quickly configure or flip on in your application. So if you build AI from scratch, it's a lot more iterative. It's a lot more like a research project. And that many leaders understand that, right? Maybe your senior leadership, your top management, isn't aware that this is not a start to finish project, but it goes in circles. It goes in iterations. And maybe sometimes after iteration 2, you look at the room, you look at the data, and you say, well, we can either extend this by another month or a quarter and hope that we get a good result. Maybe the next breakthrough is just around the corner. Or maybe sometimes you also need to be honest with yourself and say, well, this is not going as well as we thought it would be. We're not seeing the results that we need. So let's stop after iteration 2. Let's park this, or maybe let's revisit this again. We'll also come back to data again, right? It all comes back to data. Even though we're talking about AI, everybody wants to talk about shiny new objects. What are we doing with AI? How are we increasing productivity? How are we selling more? How are we reducing cost? At the end of the day, it comes back to data, right? And most organizations are not very well prepared there or very well organized because data projects are not as shiny as AI projects. So, when should you stop an AI project? I think that's as important as figuring out when should you start it. And I'm actually recording a course with LinkedIn Learning on this later this week because, as much as we want to talk about where can we use AI and how can we use it, it's important to get alignment from the very beginning with your senior leadership as well. And what are the success criteria? What are we actually trying to achieve here? How long do we think it's going to take? And if you think about the iterative process, it's very hard to estimate in some cases, right? You're optimistic that it takes 3 months. 6 months later, you're still in cycle number 2 or number 3. So when do you pull the plug? Measuring the ROI of the resources you have, if you have data scientists or developers, keeping them on this project or assigning them to something else. Right? When do we need to make a decision like that? And additional points here. But if you don't do that, if you don't set these criteria, you're basically just encouraging to kick the can down the road and hope for the next breakthrough that maybe will happen and hopefully will happen next week, next month. If we only get a little more data, if we only talk to one more stakeholder, if we only do this, then it'll be successful. Because at the end of the day, there's also reputation involved in this, right? If you or your manager has promised up the chain that this is a project that's worth investing in, it's very hard to go back and say, actually, didn't quite work, right? Didn't work out as well as we thought it would be. Because it's your reputation, their reputation, at the end of the day, that's on the line. So if you create this understanding, if you create this understanding of what are the aspects that we need to check on every project, check in, at least on a monthly basis, how are we doing against these criteria? Then you have a way out. Then you can say, well, this is not where we should spend our time, this is not where we should spend our money. And you can raise that awareness that projects are not linear, but they're more cyclical in that nature and more iterative. So how do you overcome adoption blockers, right? You build something, give it to the organization, you've worked with your business stakeholders, but maybe you're not as excited as you think they were in the very beginning. By the way, the numbering is not by intent all number one, but they're all important, right? That's the other thing. Everything is a priority. No, but joking aside, right, you need to define the business problem very clearly and from the very beginning. What is it that we're actually trying to solve? Again, it comes back to, is AI even the right technology to solve it? How do we measure it? What is a measurable KPI or a process performance indicator that we can take where we can measure the impact of the AI that we build or that we implement? What's the KPI that your business stakeholder is being measured by? What does success look like for them, and how can you help them achieve that success? Are there existing applications? I think of SAP. SAP has invested a lot in AI, has made many Gen AI capabilities available. Is there anything in these applications that we already use today that we can configure, that we can activate? Or as we're moving to a future version, what are the things that we should be thinking about? Applies to any other vendor that you have in your stack as well. Review data. Do we have the right data, fresh data, current data, complete data? Doesn't go away. Right? And involve end users. Because they're the ones that will ultimately decide, are we going to use this? Am I going to use this? Am I going to use this in the right way? Or do you think this thing is going to cost me my job and I'm just training my replacement? So involving end users is critical, but we still have to talk about it, we still have to mention it, because more times than not, it's not really happening, right? Especially in these AI projects. So what will be the challenges to overcome? On one hand, any vendor in the industry with the AI that they put out there, with the agents they put out there, they need to live up to their expectations. And sometimes marketing is a little ahead of technology. It can happen. But for any company to trust that the AI does what it's supposed to and what your vendor says it is going to do, we need to establish that level of trust and that robustness. But as you go up, with your employees, your team members, they will wonder, what does it mean for me, right? If all of a sudden there's more AI, again, am I training my replacement? Do I still have a job 3 months from now, 6 months from now? You see all the layoffs across different industries that are happening. Right? Trust is shaken up to a good extent. So as a leader, you need to figure out what is our strategy to begin with. How does AI align with our business strategy? How does it help us achieve these goals? How do we drive that change? How do we communicate clearly and openly and transparently with our employees? Which sounds a lot easier. It sounds a lot more logical than it is. And sometimes you cannot obviously say everything, but showing empathy, I think, is critically important. And we're all in this together, right? We're all figuring out what does that mean, that future with AI. How are we going to work with this new technology? So encouraging team members as well and empowering them to try this out. And then again, at the end, also comes down to data. Right? If you build an AI system that should gather information about your products, maybe your maintenance information, you want to make that information available to your customers, you still need data. You need your business data, not what OpenAI has built into their large language model, for example. So a couple of weeks ago, I met with an engineering firm, about $1 billion in revenue, sitting at the table across from the CEO, the CFO, the chief strategy officer. We're talking about AI. We quickly figured out, by the way, it's not an AI transformation, it's a business transformation that was actually needed, and AI should be an enabler. But the CEO said, well, our IT department, they say we only keep the network secure. That's what we focus on. We don't do innovation. I said, well, what do you think? How many people in your organization use ChatGPT, use DeepSeek, use unapproved apps. Like, well, yeah, you're actually right? So by just focusing on how do we secure our perimeter, we're actually excluding and ignoring anything else, the big wave that is going to hit us. Because your employees are going to use AI. They are using AI already today. So it's a matter of how do you embrace this? How do you empower them and give them guidelines and recommendations how you should use these apps, right? Don't put confidential data in there. Don't put any IP there. Don't put personal identifiable information there. Some basic ground rules. But just ignoring and saying, well, we only worry about anything that happens all the way to our firewall, and anything after that, any new apps we don't care about, won't work. Right? Because your users are going to go where they get the most productivity. And if that is new apps, if it's apps maybe even on their personal phones, you end up with a situation like this. In the fall, there was an interesting study that Slack, the workforce and messaging platform, did. And they found that 46% of the respondents said, I'm actually not telling my manager that I use AI, because if I do, they either think I'm lazy, or I'm incompetent, or I just get more work. So I'm more productive, but I'm not telling anybody. That also tells you a lot about culture and corporate culture. And again, the trust piece. So you see, it's not about technology, right? It's not about AI. It's about how do we empower and encourage our employees to use these technologies, to try them out in ways that are safe, that are approved, maybe even encourage them to try it out outside of work on their own devices. But we need to increase that literacy as well to stay ahead. And the same applies to all of us in the room as well, right? There's so many tools that are coming out on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. But unless we start to use them, just reading about them won't make us more competent or more proficient in using them and understanding where the limitations are and understanding where the opportunities are. So your team members, your teammates, maybe even yourself, they're afraid telling their manager, I use AI, I'm more productive, because that means probably end up with more work. But how can you get there? How can you scale AI from this initial idea, maybe this initial project that you have, all the way across your organization? Maybe you've done this in other projects before. I've seen this work quite well actually at SAP when I was in the S/4HANA engineering organization. How can we get more people engaged in the topic of AI? How can we get them more excited and give them more training also? And the same applies right, in your company too. So you can set up a community of multipliers. Identify people in the organization who are really, really good, really skilled at adopting new technologies, who are curious, who maybe go to the Robo Cup or the Lego Transformation or Transformers Cup or something like this, who tinker with IoT, people who have an affinity for technology. Get them together, give them training about what is AI, if they're very early on in their journey, what's available to us, how can we use this, and also have them network with each other. That's, by the way, an interesting finding for us at SAP, that our engineering teams and product managers said, well, we don't just want to sit there and go through a curriculum, we actually want to talk to others and hear what's working for you, what have you tried, where did you hit a roadblock? So not to be underestimated. So multipliers, right? Bring organizations along. These multipliers can help you scale. They can also become a feedback channel for you. The things that you roll out, how well are they being received? How well are they being used? Where are new opportunities that we can look at and bring more AI and more efficiency into that organization? And then the question is, how do you put this into a portfolio? How do you put this into an idea funnel, for example? Some things will be very early on. Maybe it's an ideation, or I talked to somebody in finance and they said, here's an opportunity that could help us close the books faster, send invoices faster, if only we were able to automate it more, for example. You have things that are in validation, maybe with your engineering teams or your data scientists. You have things that are being built. So the idea is to build this pipeline along these 5 stages and also assess what's the business value of an idea. is this even worth pursuing, or are we just doing that so we have fewer clicks and happier employees? Right? Both highly commendable goals, but maybe your CFO is not so excited about just having happier employees and just fewer clicks. Right? How can we reduce days sales outstanding? How can we reduce other metrics that move the business forward and where we can actually measure the impact? So building that pipeline of ideas is also critical to show what are the opportunities that we see. Right? And it's perfectly fine to say, well, we looked at all these, and half of those actually don't turn out to be so valuable as we thought initially. So maybe they don't even move beyond ideation. Or maybe you see at the end of validation that they're not providing the value that you expect. And again, that brings us back to when should you stop your AI project? So, as controversial as Mr. Musk might be these days, a couple of weeks ago he said, hey, we've exhausted the cumulative sum of human knowledge and data in AI training. And they caught some waves, and people said, well, did we really? Have we really reached the end of the internet and scooped up all the data that's now in large language models and available at our fingertips? And I would say we to some extent we have, but we haven't exhausted all the data, right? Because the value, as we know, the real value is in the data that is in your business, right? That is specific to your process, specific to your products, to the services you offer. It's a matter of how do we make that usable and accessible to the AI so we get better results, so we get better recommendations. So yes, it does come back to data again, but I think that's also where the opportunity is. So garbage in, garbage out still applies. Right? Unpopular to do data projects if you can do AI projects. That's where you get the funding, the data projects. Yeah, who wants to talk about data? But you have to. Right? You have to lay the foundation if you want to build that skyscraper. Otherwise, it's going to be on shaky ground. You're not going to realize those benefits that you expect. But data also mirrors what we see in the real world, right? It mirrors the same biases, the same worldviews to some extent that we have that are encoded in data. So we need to be aware of that too as we build AI systems, that there are some preferences, some biases in there. You can test this out yourself. Right? Go to ChatGPT and ask it a question. The doctor was late. The doctor yelled at the nurse because he was late. Who was late? In most cases, ChatGPT will tell you he equals the doctor, just because statistically there are probably more male doctors than female doctors. So in a similar way, as you work with data, you need to be aware of these biases as well. So how can you support the adoption of AI and agents in your company? I think first of all, by realizing that this gap exists. There's so much new technology that's coming out on a weekly, on a monthly, on a quarterly basis that it's hard to even absorb and understand what's happening. So staying on top of larger trends that are happening in the industry, things that vendors like SAP and others are doing, anticipating where are they going, what does it mean for my business? How can I prepare for this kind of technology to adopt it and to bring it into my organization? And ultimately, see that you close the gap, right, as much as you can. So, to bring it home, right? The three key things that stay pretty much universal. It doesn't matter if you talk about machine learning, about AI, and if we'll talk about quantum computing in 2 years or in 5 years. Stay aware of the trends, what is happening largely in the industry, how does it impact my business, my industry, our organization? How can we use these technologies to our advantage to either make more money or save more money? It always comes down to these two things. How can we bring our people along on this journey and encourage them to use this technology and try it out? Because actually, we want you to use this, right? We expect you to be productive and more productive. You're not lazy just because you use ChatGPT. But if you do use it, please also tell others how you use it. Let's share the knowledge so everybody benefits from it. And then, yes, it always comes back to data. So, if you like to focus, or if you like to learn more about other resources that are available, I have 2 courses out on LinkedIn Learning about agentic AI. I just started my private community, the AI Leadership Circle. And if you stick around for a little bit outside, we even have a book signing of the AI Leadership Handbook. So make sure to grab your copy this afternoon. Thank you so much.